I'll do that. Maybe that's just from Cole's AI guy. Hello, everyone. So we've got, I think everybody. So we're just going to wait a couple more minutes until maybe 11:02 and a half, just to let the stragglers come in.
I didn't get a message. This meeting is being recorded. Okay, so I just have to say okay, and it should be. Then when it's time to record, I think you hit the record button.
Um, yeah. Well, it says there's like a pause
It
or a
says it's
stop
recording
recording.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we're good. We'll just hope for the best. Yeah, I guess that's probably 11:02 and a half. We'll go ahead and get started. And if folks come in the middle, then we'll let them in. So greetings. Thank you for joining. We are super excited to have this conversation today about butcher waste, animal mortality composting, me composting. I'm gonna shortly turn it over to Jean, our presenter for the day, but I would love to go around the room just to see who's on the call and if you would be willing to introduce yourself, maybe a little bit about who you're with, why you're here, but the other and any other really big important questions you might have, you're welcome to ask them later. But if you want to share those questions or thoughts you have now, but the really important thing I'd love to hear from everybody is why are you joining us today? What is it about this topic that's of interest to you? How does it relate to your work? What do you hope to learn out of it? That would be fantastic. So, Jean, I'm going to save you till last because you're the presenter, but
Are
you're
you composting and are you also,
oh, good one.
is there something specific you need to know that pertains to all of this?
Perfect. Perfect, perfect. So in my line, John Culpepper, you are the first person next to Jean. If you would like to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Great. John Culpepper, co-founder Compost for Good, and my role in this grant is to assess different composts to see how mature they are and to assess them based on their microbiological diversity. So that's my role.
Amazing. Um, so next is Racy. We've got the whole grant team right in a row.
Hi, everybody. I'm Racy Henderson. I'm the co-owner of Reba Rock Farm, and we are the grantee for the SARE grant looking at static pile mortality composting in Essex, New York. My team manages our pile, working with Jean and Jen and John to try to get it right when we put everything in so that we don't have to do anything else. And I'm also excited to hear about who else is here and what folks are doing. We're about to shift into a slightly different kind of mortality composting in a few weeks. And so there's going to be another learning curve. And I'm just curious to hear who's here and what everybody's doing.
Awesome. Debbie Aller, you are next in line.
Yeah, hey everyone. So I'm new director of the New York Core, which is the Center for Organics Recycling and Education at Cornell. And the Cornell Waste Management Institute is morphing into New York Core. And so I'm currently working alongside Jean and will be taking over a lot of work that she is doing in the coming years. So learning, or let's say educating myself about mortality composting. Um, but yeah, I'll be doing a lot more of this around the state in the near future. So just listening in as an attendee today, but thanks for hosting this.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Deb. Cole, there is no actual Cole out there, right? It looks like it's just right. It's just Cole's AI. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Trisha, you're next in line.
Hi, I'm Trish. I work for USDA NRCS as a district conservationist. And I'm basically here to educate myself as well. We do have a couple of newer programs, as well as older programs that deal with composting and building compost facilities. So I'm just trying to suck in as much information as I can.
Nice. Thank you. Cody, you are next in line.
Sorry, my computer was a little slow to start that. Hi, everyone. My name is Cody. I am a senior public health educator at the Clayton County Health Department, and I'm also working part-time with Compost for Good on some communications pieces. So I'm just here to kind of educate for one side of my work, but also here to kind of just sit in and see what's going on.
Cool. Thanks. Alyssa, you just hopped in. Can you hear us okay? We're just doing introductions if you'd be willing to introduce yourself.
Oh, hi, sure. Can you hear me?
Yep,
My tech is a little off, so I'm leaving my video off.
we gotcha.
Um, okay, my name's Elisa. I am from Plastic Free Delaware. We have a community composting program, and I've newly taken on the community compost program director role, and um I'm just really interested in composting in all forms. And so I'm very interested and curious as to learning more about mortality composting.
Excellent. And the actual Cole has joined us. Cole, do you have a couple seconds to come off mute and introduce yourself?
Sure. Sorry, I'm running a little late. Really excited to see the presentation, but I'm the agriculture team leader at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Essex County. Um, so yeah, that's that. Is there anyone else that needs to be introduced, or am I the last one here?
You're the last one right now. Cool. Thanks. I guess I'll introduce myself then a little more officially. I am Jen Perry. I am a co-founder with John and his daughter Katie of Compost for Good, and our mission in life is to promote all forms of organic upcycling into compost with all entities, so farmers, municipalities, businesses, universities. We do a lot of different community scale project promotion. I'm that Compost for Good is nested with the Adirondack North Country Association's food system program. So we are with Inca. I also own and operate a food scrap hauling and composting business in the Redford area. We are up to 10 tons of food waste a week, food scraps a week into compost. It's a pretty exciting milestone for us. And I will share that I recently lost two pets in the time span of a month, and I was able to use lessons that I've learned from both Jean and Racy to lay them to their forever homes in piles of wood chips. I have to say, it was a really fitting way for them to go on. This is a very broad topic, a lot of different potential paths that it can go. And on that note, I'm gonna actually hold on. There's one more person joining. So Jean, if we could just wait a sec. Her name's Tori. To have her
Absolutely.
introduce herself, and then we'll turn it over to you for your part of the show. Hi, Tori. Can you hear us?
Are you muted?
Tori, if you can hear us, we just finished. We're just wrapping up introductions, and if you have a couple seconds to introduce yourself, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll just get started with the presentation. Oh, there she is.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Hi.
I'm Tori Fisher. I'm with Penn State Extension. I'm one of our compost SMEs.
Subject matter expert. What does that mean? What's SME? Sorry.
Yeah.
Cool.
So,
Awesome. Yay.
yes, we're matter. Tori is a subject matter expert, and we will talk a little bit about that, not much about it. More of it will be about mortality and what we're doing. But subject matter experts are people that have been trained in disposal of animal carcasses, mostly animal carcasses. They don't deal with butcher waste that much, but I'm sure Tori needs all of the, all of this will help us along as we're working through our journey to get where we want to be. An SME is a person that would go out on disasters. So either in the state or out of the state, depending on who's asking for who, that can happen. Oh, we've got Craig's coming in.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead, Jean, and
Yeah.
yeah, we can have him introduce himself in the.
Yeah, let Craig come in. He's the subject matter or the disposal expert for Penn State,
Oh,
for
cool.
Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So,
Yay. Do you want to get started, Jean, or do you want to have, do you want
yeah,
to?
Craig, go ahead and introduce yourself. The short version.
Okay, go ahead. Whatever Gene says is gospel.
Wow. That's an endorsement.
Uh, Craig Williams and I have been working together. He has for what, 30 years, 25 years? You're not that old. And we've worked
35.
on different fact sheets together for mortality and mortality disposal. And Tori, you're working under Craig, I think. Craig?
Awesome.
Do you want to talk any further, Craig? You're good. Okay.
Great. Well, I'll turn it over to Eugene and any introduction you want to give about your life and your history and the context and all the trips that you take around the world doing the amazing work that you're doing. I'll turn it all over to you.
I'll make it fairly short. I am, as Deb Aller had said, I am in between. I probably won't be retiring for about another year plus. But right now we're in between Cornell Waste Management Institute and New York State Core. What I have done for the last 35 years or more is compost, all different feedstocks. Somewhere around 89, 90, 1989, 1990, we were running into a lot of problems with disposal of meat. And I'll just start it on this slide to talk about why we're here, why we're doing what we're doing in general. But we didn't really have a lot of ways to dispose of things, and things are getting even tighter as our days go on. So what did we do with dead animals? Well, we used to drag them out back, bury them, and we can still do that. What do we do with our butcher waste? Similarly, if we think about slaughtering deer, they're generally done and, and we don't have any place for that. And that can be a problem. So we're looking at all the possible options of how to dispose all of this meat from that time on. Rendering was having some difficulties. They lost markets. So rendering, we were going through some growing pains, and the rendering industry was very large. But then we started doing things like feeding meat to chickens and dairy. And they're not really meat eaters. And then we had disease issues that potentially could stem from some of those things, like mad cow, chronic wasting disease, COVID. We have all of these disease issue, high path avian influenza. So we had to think about, should we be feeding, first of all, they're not meat eaters, but should we be feeding meat to cows and chickens, cows and poultry? And that USDA came through and said, nope, we're not doing that anymore. So that whole bubble kind of burst. and there were less markets for butcher waste and mortality. So butcher waste is still the premium. Mortality, there's always a question. How did it die? Is it safe to be putting it into a compost pile? Is it safe to eat at that point? We also put in some rules about animals being ambulatory when they go onto a truck and when they come off of a truck to be butchered. So, and then there's an inspector on that end in case there was a tumor or something like that that was obvious, that they might condemn that meat. So we've gone through a lot of different iterations of how are we going to get rid of this stuff. And for a little bit longer than we should have, we've been dragging things back out back, or putting deer meat and deer bones and offal and stuff like that in ravines in rural areas. And we might dig a pit and just keep filling it up. And some more rules were made about all of that stuff. So then we had another problem, and this has to do with drugs, pharmaceuticals. So pentobarbital is used, a lot of this meat goes into pet food. So pentobarbital is used to euthanize animals, and it was getting into the pet food industry. And that's kind of a problem. They were allowing like 4% to get in, and that was either making your dog or cat, killing them, or making them quite sick or quite sleepy. It would be just like a therapeutic dose at that point. But if for a small animal, that animal could die from having exposure to that. So USDA went to a zero tolerance for pentobarbital in pet food meat. So somehow it was sliding in there. We did a lot of roundtables and a lot of getting together when they closed down some of the people that were taking our meat and passing it through to people, to this industry. So that had to be stopped. So some of that industry is opened up again, but this happened all the way across the country. So from California to New York to Maine, and we were having issues with this, and animals were obviously sliding into the pet food industry. So that was one of our last big hits. Now it's, we have problems with COVID and high path avian influenza. And I know when our egg layers depopulate, just spent laying hens, those laying hens might be crossing borders, they're killed, and then they go either to a factory or something like that and go into soups and stews. So during COVID and with high path avian influenza, all of that was just shut down. And so we are than we ever wanted to. Some of that meat for soups and stews that has picked up again. But we also, during COVID, we also had, like, if things were going to Canada and coming back here as soup and stew, we had problems with crossing that border during COVID and now with high path avian influenza. So disease. I didn't mention landfills. Landfills will take some material, but they really don't like to take some of this meat and whole animals. And even eggs. I've got a picture of eggs up there where we're crushing the eggs. They're considered liquid waste, and landfills take solid waste. And as we know, any living being is a lot water. there's a lot of moisture in all of us and in all of the animals. Okay, let's see there we go. Okay. So onto the carcass and butcher waste composting. As we're going through this, if you want to put questions in the chat, you can do that. And I don't mind this being more of a conversation, because this is pretty simple stuff, but it is pretty technical stuff. So if you have questions, it's easier to, understand what we're going forward from. If you want to throw some of that stuff in, and maybe Jen can keep an eye on that. And if there's a point of information that we need, we can answer those questions as we go. Okay. So composting butcher waste, manure, dead stock, eggs, all of those materials is what we're going to be talking about the rest of the time. And hopefully I haven't lost too many photos. We did lose some photos. That's a pain. Can you guys see anything? Just somebody give me a thumbs up or a...
No.
Okay. Okay. We obviously lost some photos. They just didn't come in when we put it into PowerPoint. They were all there before that. So, let me see where we are. Okay. So it's really nice to see pictures of the bases. Let me go from there and okay. Okay, I think we can do it. I'm just going to go through the processing of animals. The first thing we do, we have a call, we have an outbreak, we have whatever, and we need to first find a carbon source. So we're looking for a chunky carbon, and there are some pictures. Hopefully some of the pictures later on will come out and we'll be able to see those. But they're all different carbon sources. So I'll talk about those later on as we find some of those, as we see the pictures of some of those. But right now we're preparing a bed with a wood chip or other materials that might be on the farm. When we're dealing with butcher waste and mortality, full livestock, it's best if we can use a wood chip, a good chunky municipal wood chip. There are some other things that we can use, like corn stover, sunflower hulls, nut holes in general. There are other things that we can do, but if we can get wood chips, especially for these bases, it's really, really important to the whole process. And as we go through the slides, you'll be able to see where I'm going with this. And we need the air to circulate around. So we need a good chunky base and a good chunky material to go over, but we can use a little bit more dense material to go over and in some of the layers. So we lay a 24-inch base of wood chips down on the ground. And let's see, this is a base. This is for some roadkill composting that we were doing. And this is showing us some of we're actually layering in this one. But we have the chunky wood chip base. And I'll tell you a little story, especially with the DOT and roadkill composting. It's important for the DOT people came to us, and they actually gave us a lot of money to do research on roadkill because it's a big problem for them. They weren't forced to do it by regulation. They said, we know this is going to be, there's going to be pressure on some of this stuff, just leaving them on the roadsides. So we're going to be proactive and we're going to look at this. So some of your communities may be composting roadkill and some may not. There are other things that we do with roadkill, like feed animals, especially zoo animals and wildlife rehabbers and some of that kind of stuff. So there are other things that are done with them, but most of the DOT animals hopefully do find their way into composting or into other places. DOT, so we started with farmers to do all this work, but DOT came in pretty quickly and said, we have dead deer that we have to deal with. DOT has roadkill and deer. When the deer are alive, they're under DEC's jurisdiction. And when they are dead, DOT takes over, or local roads takes over for roadkill. So, farmers, all different materials, all different types, haylage and silage and bad bales and rotting bales and all kinds of stuff. And they would build piles, and it really wasn't working that well. And it would become a mess because they were using more of the on-farm feedstocks. And when DOT did this and just had wood chips and deer, when they did it wrong, it all came out right. So we know that the wood chips are very forgiving and allow air to circulate around the deer in those piles. So we're going to lay the animals down on the bed. If it's a large animal, we may slice the stomach just so it doesn't bloat. And if we don't, it will bloat. And what happens with that, it will blow the cover off the pile. With deer, generally they've been hit by a car, they're not intact, so we don't have to do very much with deer, but we can. We may want to, if it's really an intact animal, we may want to, because they do bloat, and we see that on the side of the road. This was a research animal that we were working with when we were doing some of the pentobarbital work to see how the pentobarbital made it through the composting process. We put it in the center of the pile, and if we're making a windrow, we want to extend that pile after we cover the animal up. We want to extend that pile down so that we have a place to put that material, the next thing that comes out, whether it's a load of butcher waste or it's another animal. And I usually encourage people to put a flag in with a date. And I have butchers doing this right now, where we'll put the date that we put that material in. Then we know how long that's been composting, because as you'll see later, or as you can imagine, we have butcher waste every week that has to go in. So we have to keep addressing that, and it may be put in once or twice a week, but we've got to address that. So we want to extend that bed down so that it forms a windrow, and a windrow is simply a long, narrow pile, or a long pile. Some of them are not that narrow. And we'll talk about size a little bit more as we go. I'll talk about that with different medium that goes in. We want to make sure there's 2 feet of material around the whole carcass. If we have smaller animals, and one of my adages is, if you can lift it, you can layer it. So if I can pick it up, I can actually put it in 2 layers. And that goes for chickens and calves and some pigs and maybe some goats and some heifers, some smaller animals, because we need that proper carbon to nitrogen ratio. We've got the wood chips on the bottom here. We've got animals in the layers. And then we're putting another layer over top, but we're putting the other animals in proximity, in close proximity to those animals, so that the air can circulate around each of those whole animals. We don't want them to be too far apart. We don't want them to be too close together. But if I have a really young animal, if I have a piglet or something like that that needs to be composted, that will go right in between the mother's legs or whatever, another animal's legs. And so that I have that mass balance of carbon and nitrogen. We're putting the second layer of deer on the pile here. This was a really, really cold time. All the deer were frozen. You can see there, it's not just rigor mortis. It is, it's frozen deer. So we put those in the pile, and we knew that in this particular situation, we were putting frozen animals in. But we had another situation where somebody just stacked the animals, the frozen animals, up in a parking lot, and in the spring they melted. And that's a problem. I'll deal with the animals when they're frozen, but I don't want to deal with them when they melt, when they've been melted, because then they stink, they are hard to move around, and all that kind of stuff. So if you do end up with a frozen animal, you do want to get it into the carbon, get it in an envelope of carbon around the whole animal. This pile did freeze because it was 5 degrees Fahrenheit out when we were building these. And we brought in some warmer material. Sometimes we can kickstart things with a warm material, especially if we're in the winter. Had too much, and we were in a DOT residency here in a fenced area, and we just decided we were going to let it go au natural. So we let the process work. Well, it froze. And then as the piles heated up, as the air heated up, the ambient temperature heated up, the piles heated up, and everything melted and everything worked really well. Because the animals were frozen, we didn't have anything digging into the piles. So we were in good shape with this. And we really do try to manage for that. If we don't put a good enough cover, a good enough 24 inches over the animal, then we are liable to have animals digging into the pile.
So Jean, just to clarify, so you put the deer in frozen, and because of the like the did you have to wait for the outside air temperatures to warm up, or does the decomposition process happen um even if you put the carcasses in frozen, as long as you build the pile correctly?
Once they're frozen, you've lost. You just have to let that animal just envelop it, cover it, put a biofilter over top of it, and a biofilter under it. So that's that whole envelope of carbon. We want to make sure that that's down. We have to wait for the air temperatures to come up.
Okay.
And in May, that happened. We used to keep ice. We'd cut ice from ponds and stuff like that. And we had things called ice boxes instead of refrigerators way back when. We kept that ice so that it would make it through the warmer weather. We kept that in sawdust, and that insulated that ice so it stayed frozen for a much longer time. When we put it in the wood chips, everything's starting, the air is blowing through there, the air is warming up, and it's ready to go. But it's not the animals that are generating the heat in the beginning when you have a frozen animal.
Oh, okay.
So it's really the ambient temperature that's doing that.
Cool.
Okay.
Racy, would you mind, Racy, I've read this a couple times and I'm still a little bit confused. We are finding too thin of a layer. Would you mind elaborating on what you mean by that?
Sure. I was just noticing in the cartoon pictures that and this is relative, right? But our pile, we have about 18 inches. We're doing about 18 inches of a base, And then we put viscera, feathers, heads, blood from usually about 450 chickens a week go into that pile. And then we put the 24 inches of carbon around the outside. So we kind of make this bathtub and then put the carbon on the top. And what we've found is on weeks, there's some weeks in the beginning of the season where we're just doing 100 birds, like our team is training, or there's for some reason we're not doing the 450, we're doing 100. And in that case, we weren't able to make a bathtub that was like appropriately sized to get the pile didn't get up to temperature the way that it does when there's like we've been talking about it like a burrito for our pile. So like there's a windrow, but there's this like the center of the burrito that's needs to be like seems like from the temperature tracking needs to be pretty high and narrow, like versus flat and wide for the pile to get up to temperature. So that's what I was trying to say. And this is not during the winter. This is from June to now. June to October.
Absolutely. And we do compost all different medium in different size piles. But if the shape of a windrow is a really important thing, it facilitates the composting process. So I've got some slides after that I'll talk more about the dynamics of the piles. But I'm going to talk a little bit about moisture right now, but Racy is absolutely right. We're going to talk about volume more and about how we're building that, the shapes of piles and all. And we can do it with this particular illustration. What we've done with this is we're assuming that that's 5 feet tall. The person's next to the pile or 4 feet tall is what we're going for. 5 feet. And I think, Racy, yours is probably about 4 feet.
We're trying, yeah, it's probably 4 feet. We were aiming for a 5 foot wide at the base by 5 feet high, which is possible almost, but not quite. So it's really more like a 4 foot high and 5 to 7 feet wide at the base, just because of the mechanics of the tractor and the volumes that we have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the 7 feet is for a base, the 7 feet is probably a good thing. With some of the very, very large scale stuff that we're doing with avian influenza, we might have a 14-foot wide bed of 24 inches of carbon that goes on for hundreds of yards. So we're building them that way. One of the other things with the shape of the windrow is we're going to add. So what Racy is doing on her operation is she's putting stuff in on one end. So she puts that filling in there. She puts the carbon around it. And she may need to be a little bit wider. She may need to be the 7 feet wide, and then make sure that that's stacked up in 2 layers so that the carbon and nitrogen ratio is working better. She also talked about adding the blood from the slaughter. And we want to make sure that we are getting the moisture in there. And that's what this slide is actually showing, is when we're in really dry situations. I know we've been in a lot of drought, like all through August this year in New York. We needed moisture in some of those piles. With butcher waste and with animals, we don't need that much. But if you're in a very, very arid climate, New Mexico, Arizona, California, we want to wet all of the layers, especially the bases, so that, because the whole process of composting is driving moisture off. And we want to be able to keep that pile moist enough so that we're not actually drying out the animals. When people use forced air and stuff like that to compost mortality, and I've seen a few people do it, they're generally mummifying whatever animal they're trying to to compost. And that just dries things out and the process stops. But guess what? We don't have any pathogen kill. We still have a lot of disease and microbial activity that we don't necessarily want in a finished compost. So one of the most important things about composting is it kills disease, it kills spores, it balances out the microbial activity in there. And really what we're doing is farming microbes here. So we're keeping those microbes happy. If they don't have the proper amount of moisture and the proper amount of air, they'll shut down and we'll have a cold pile. And that's not where we want to be. We always want to have a pile. Generally, when I build a pile with enough mass, with enough meat in it, in 12 to 24 hours, that pile should be heated up and it should be working. Okay?
Hey, Jean, I'm just wondering, one of the things we notice is the way that we build our windrow is we sort of build out and then we actually go back and build on top again, mostly because our system is a 6-month, we're producing compost for 6 months and then we're closing the pile and then we're waiting for 6 months to see if it's ready to go. So we and we have to kind of build back on top because we don't have enough space to like make a really low, shallow pile forever. And what we notice is that first layer, like the first so this batch of 450 every week really doesn't get up to temperature as quickly and stay as hot as that second layer does. And I'm wondering one about how you know when you need to water, because I am wondering with that first layer that goes on the base layer, there's quite a lot of carbon there versus the second layer there's only about 12 inches between the nitrogen on the first layer and the second layer, maybe a little bit more, but and that second layer heats up a lot faster. And so I'm wondering if watering that first layer, that all the wood chips when we first put it down might make a difference. And when would you know whether to, like, should we just try that? What would you say for when to try watering?
It might help, but I don't think that's your problem. I think you need to build both layers and stair step it all the way through. You need to have your first stack, then elongate, and then do two
Go
layers
back. That's
there.
what we've been doing. And I guess I just am not sure because the thermometers only go in so far, right? So on that, once you stair stack onto the second level, your thermometers are only in that top part. But I know that the bottom part didn't get up to 135, for example, or it got close, but it was there, it's not really there for 3 to 5 days. And so it's more a question of like, I know my temp from the top is good, but I'm not sure that the bottom got good. And if the top is good, is the bottom, can we assume that the bottom's good?
It should happen all at the same time. So you should put half of the 450 birds down on the first layer, then put carbon over it, then put the other half of and make a haystack. Your first one is going to be a haystack. Then you're going to
split up the
elongate that
nitrogen
haystack
more
out.
Mm.
Okay. So that's the only way that you're going to be able to get it, because once you've added raw material to that second layer, then you're starting at ground zero again, and that is not where you want to be. You want that material to be working right away and heating up pretty quickly. And at the time of year that you're doing it, there really isn't any reason except for volume. And if you're putting blood in there, that will work. So,
okay.
Yeah. And we're gonna go through Racy's changes more in detail at the end of this, as as a case study. But this was really good to put in there now because it is a case study, and we are trying to teach people from the birds. You're doing 100,000 birds a season?
No way. 10.
No, I'm sorry, 60,000?
10.
10,000. Okay, sorry.
That would
Just
be
a
amazing.
zero.
That'd be amazing. Your scale's big, Gene.
10,000. So it's seems like a lot of waste, but it's not a lot of waste. So we've got to use it effectively. So sometimes we layer, and when we have really big operations, we'll be mixing centers. So we'll mix the carbon and the nitrogen together and then put it in. And that might help your situation as well, Racy, because you can be mixing, especially when things get pretty dense, the air has trouble getting through that. If water or moisture is in that space, air can't go through it because water wins. So we don't want to have any exposed parts there. So nothing should be showing, everything should be covered. That's why we end up with animals coming in. And this one could have been a situation where the top blew off. It's a DOT roadkill deer, and the top may have blown off because an animal was intact. And so it's possible. We just have to go back and check and make sure that it hasn't sunk down and that there is cover over top. Odor, I'm not going to do that one right now. Everything needs to be covered because we have to remember what we're feeding, what we're trying to raise here. We're trying to raise livestock and animals. We're not trying to raise wildlife and bring wildlife into our properties. So it's really important for us to make sure that we're doing things well. If I were coming by this pile, I would be smelling odor. And so are the animals, obviously. But some animals have better sense of smell than we do. You can say that, but if we can get enough carbon over top, then we're in good shape. Boy, if none of my slides came in, we're going to be in trouble. Wow. I don't know what's in there. Let me keep going. Okay, we've got some stuff. Other feedstocks besides whole animals. This happens to be poultry, beef, broth, bones, and there's a grinder over in the corner here that you can see the top of. This operation is a butchering operation with the poultry and a broth making operation. They mix the poultry and the bones because all of it, they do produce a lot of finished food or cooked foods. So they need to have all that stuff and need to deal with all of it. And the bones are a new thing for them because they just added the broth business. So we're working on how do we get through that. My preference is to leave the bones whole and deal with it at the end because they actually add pore space, but it wasn't working that well. So we have decided to grind all of this. And Craig, I will share all these pictures with you. Couldn't get to both things at once, but Craig has a grinding question about Craig has a grinding question about dealing with beef and dairy. Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, just a real quick question on that farm right there. What percent of the volume do you think is the actual bones? And thus,
Small percent.
if we do grind them, is it, a small percent or a high percent? That's all.
It's a small percent. It's a pretty small percent. But getting them out later is more of a problem because they do want to they have to move this material. This is millions of birds. So we're talking about, I don't even know how many birds they're processing in this operation. It is a very large operation. It's ducks, and the other beef materials are in there. So there are beef bones. So they are grinding those, putting it through a grinder, and that seems to be working. But they still have material that's extremely wet. So, and the blood also goes off into another container, and that's used other ways. That is not being put into the compost piles right now. I think they have an option for blood to go someplace for a protein source, either drying it or something like that. I'm actually not sure what they're doing with that, with the blood that goes down into that system.
Can I rephrase my question then? What about the beef bones are they buying in? Is that a large volume or small volume compared to what they already have?
Small volume.
Okay,
It's a small volume.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. So basically the material is dumped over here. They go in and it comes out of the kitchen, gets dumped in here. This guy is picking the material up and putting it in that grinder. They have two pieces of equipment. This is just for safety, health and safety things. There is a lot of ammonia. This is a high tunnel, a large, very large high tunnel that it's being initially mixed in because of odor issues and other things. It's just a very large operation. So you're dealing with a lot of stuff. So this coverall also has some air filtration stuff, but the person that's working at this end is fine and has a lot of open air here. The person that is at the other end where the air is being pulled down and exhausted out of the farm or filtered before it goes out, that end has a ton of ammonia. So we have to be really careful of workers that are in those situations. The other person is in a closed cab, so he is able to work in that closed cab and run that operation. But it can be a real long-term health issue for somebody that's working in conditions like that. So another butcher, I think most of the butcher stuff is going to come through because I just added those into this.
Jean, I've
So,
got a question.
yep.
I don't know if you're going to cover this later, but when one of the things that we're going to be doing is basically functioning as a cut and wrap. So we will not have the viscera because the animal will be slaughtered USDA, and we'll just bring the quarters back. And so we'll basically only have bones, pork bones, lamb bones, beef bones.
Okay.
It seems to me like that's not enough nitrogen to just mix with wood chips to make anything happen. And we don't have a bone grinder. How do we deal with disposal of those bones?
I think you're not going to have a huge amount, it sounds like. And
We
they're
will
all cut
do,
bones.
they're all cut bones. And I mean, I'm not sure the volume. We will have, 10 lambs, 30 pigs, and maybe 2 or 3 beef, but it's not large compared to what you work with, but it is like something we need to of, and we would like to compost.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. So are you going to cut the bones is the question.
we wouldn't normally, no, unless, no, I mean, some bones will be cut just by nature of the cut itself, but most of them will just be like deboned. They'll be deboning. They will have been deboned. So we could cut them, I suppose, if that makes a difference on the composting side.
Yeah, I would suggest that you think about cutting bones for dog bones. Especially
We can't sell that many. We have so much already
Okay.
in inventory. So yeah, we do as much of that as we can. Particularly marrow bones go quickly, but like pork and lamb bones, we have tons, and it just doesn't move fast enough to.
Okay.
We will have,
Lamb bones should go away pretty
10% will be
quickly.
sold. What's that?
The lamb bones should go away very quickly because the animals are not mature. So should be okay. As much of the marrow bones, it sounds like you are cutting some of that stuff. So anything that can be cut, that's always going to help the process. But you don't have to. All that material can just go in as is, and then you might have to sift those out later before you sell it. Reba Rock is working to produce a very high quality medium, compost medium with high nutrient value and all that. And most of our meat compost is a higher nutrient value. The lowest with poultry, it's going to be a higher value because everything about a bird is rocket fuel, and the feed, the animal itself, the eggs, the manure, they're all very high in ammonia. So that's what we're working to mix and to work with. But it's going to come out a little bit higher than a vegetative waste compost, which would be, you know, an NPK of 111. A meat waste compost can be a 222 pretty easily. And a poultry waste up to, without additives, up to more like a 555. Depends on what you're adding to those materials, but it really does. We say that compost doesn't have a lot of fertilizer value. When we get to meat, which we've always said, don't put it in your compost pile, that's when we get the higher nutrient composts. And we do want to make sure that it's a finished compost, that all of those nutrients have been mineralized and are plant available. So we do want to make sure that we're not rushing our process. And with that large operation here, that's what we're working with right now. And I have a few more pictures of this farm as we go down. Hopefully that didn't disappear here. So bones, no bones, we have to think about that. When we do a whole animal, we're going to have lots of bones in those piles. And that's always a conundrum. What are we going to do with those? Do we want to reuse that medium once we've gone through the compost process? Do I want to reuse that medium? And I do. If I can, especially if I have bones in there, I'll take those bones out and use those as part of the bulky material for the next pile. Everything should be out of the bones. So you're going to have a hollow bone, a long hollow bone with no marrow in it generally by that point, or else it hasn't processed properly. So we lose the brain, we lose the marrow. All of that goes away if we've done the processing properly. Other questions? Okay. So a large butcher, they're working, this is their offal that's coming from sheep, goat, and I think a lot of beef, but I don't know their exact numbers. This is what we have, and we started 3 months ago. These piles were started. And we are, I think they are up to 4 piles right now. And in this bottom picture here, we are taking the 3-month processed end. We checked it out. We looked to see if there was any offal in there. I just went out last week with the person, and we wanted to see what was in there in that section of the pile. There's a flag right to the left of the picture there. And he has all his dates all lined up, so he knows exactly how old everything is. What we want to do with this is, since the meat is gone, we're going to reuse that. So any of the bones that are in there, they're going to go into the base. I don't want those wood chips on the top of a new pile, but I want them on the base of a new pile. So they can go down onto the ground at that point. They can be put into a new 24-inch base, and then they'll put more offal into those piles. So they're recirculating their wood chips because they can, and they're such a large operation that it will be beneficial to them to do that. It's a lot of wood chips that are coming into the operation. It is way in the North Country. Snow is going to fly soon. And so we have to make sure that that they are ready to be able to get through the whole winter. And because they have heat in their piles and they're going to start with hot piles all the time, they can nestle the butcher waste right up to the next to the other medium, the other meat waste that we put down, so that we can keep the heat in those piles. And we expect that it will work. We have 130 degrees in these windrows easily, and they are large windrows. They're about, I can't see over them, so 5.5 feet tall when they've settled. And that's determined by the type of equipment that you have. And they've got a Bobcat here, or a Bobcat type of piece of equipment. It's small. They will be growing into a larger bucket at some point because they are a large operation. And they've got to get those big bins that we saw in the first picture out to these piles to be able to dump it. So you're seeing us, should be the first bed that we ever built. So the first bed, and we've made a good deep bed there because we have quite a bit of blood in these piles, in these containers. We're physically dumping the containers over. The Kubota is moving these, tipping them over, and then we're helping with the last bits. They're using forks at this point, but we were just doing our first batches right then and making things work.
Jean, I have a quick question. Where are the farmers getting all these wood chips? Are they linking up with another farm, or are they producing or getting it from themselves, or how is that part of it working?
Wood chips are a big deal, and they're a big deal when we have disease outbreaks, when we have, I'll talk a little bit more about HPAI, but I was on an operation that had 1.2 million birds, eggs, manure, and feed that had to be disposed of. And we brought in 180 tractor trailer loads full of wood chips. And that's not our largest outbreaks. That was a relatively small one. Where do we get those chips? So we're looking for the farms. We look to the solid waste people, because solid waste people know where all the wood chips are. The cable people are, the NYSEGs, in our case in New York, NYSEG and the other energy companies. They have to clear roads. So they have to make sure that a lot of the stuff is off the roads. They're always looking to bring it someplace. If they're chipping and they can't chip and blow, sometimes we're chipping and blowing into the environment, but there are so many places where we can't chip and blow onto somebody's lawn. So a lot of that material goes back to either a yard, to DOTs, to some of the cable guys actually bring it back. They're often your neighbors, and most of these are farms or rural butcher operations that are doing this stuff. So get to know your neighbors, see where the tree companies are working, see where the cable companies are working, and all that, and ask them to bring wood chips to your farm. And that's how this farm is getting its chips, is you've got to kind of be resourceful. I don't know if I want to say it. Yeah, I'll say it on this. I have some allocations. Wood chips are important enough so that I have some allocations of $1,000 allocations that I can pass through to farmers and butchers that are composting meet so that they can secure wood chips. Sometimes I'll need a tractor trailer load full of wood chips. It's going to cost me, and I can get them for free from the landfills, from the municipalities, but I've got to pay $500 to get them shipped to me, or $1,000 to get them shipped to the farm. So sometimes you're using that money to move those chips around, and sometimes you're using it to pay for the chips. But I don't feel, because I manage wood chips, I don't feel that, and that's paid for with tax dollar money. I don't feel like we should be paying for a lot of wood chips. You do have to get them trucked to you. Okay. I've also worked with NRC, with the waste managers nationwide, to say, especially with the high path avian influenza, where we really need lots of wood chips, and our large farmers where we need lots of wood chips, we talk to our municipalities and say, when you're having trouble getting rid of wood chips, all of these people can use wood chips. So if you're doing that, I got a call from Onondaga County that they needed to move wood chips off of their sites because they had too much material on their site. So they were looking for anybody who was willing to take wood chips, and in that situation, they were doing some of the trucking. So, you've got to be resourceful. You got to know where they are, but they are in a lot of different places. For some of the farm waste, some of the waste products, we can use some bedding materials, some shavings, when it comes down to poultry and stuff like that. Racy is actually using some shavings and stuff like that and manure in her mix. So hers is a small operation, but it's putting all these component parts together, and this is all just comes down to scale. Okay. We also have wood chip maps on the Cornell Waste Management Institute website, and we can't easily keep that up because wood chips move around all the time. So it's hard for us to do that, but you can get an idea of where wood chips are, and and you might be able to get some stuff and think about, think about where you need to get them from, where you can get them from. There's also a company called chipdrop.com that is supposed to be working in a lot of rural areas and urban areas in New York State, where they may be able to drop you full loads of wood chips. And that's the idea. They just don't have places to drop them. And if they put them in a landfill, then the landfill they don't want them there because they can be useful for other things. So. Wow. Okay, I'll talk about this system. Since some of the text is there. Oh, no, these aren't going to come up. I was working in the Hurricane Florence. So I wonder if the next one came up. I'm going to have to redo this for you guys anyway, looks like. I worked Hurricane Florence, and we had millions and millions of birds, a lot of meat birds that are on the floor that were flooded out because of the hurricane. And we actually had to clean out the barns. And it was a couple weeks before people could even go in to deal with that, because there were a lot of people affected by it as well. Once they got into the barns, barns were filled with liquid. And this is a picture of a vacuum truck sucking liquid out of the barn. So it's liquefied manure, water, liquefied birds that have already degraded. And really, a bird can disappear in 16 to 20 days in a good compost pile. So they go pretty quickly. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the larger scale. But that works pretty well. So the vacuum truck was picking it up, and we built things that I consider carbon volcanoes. So lots of shavings, lots of wood chips were formed into a volcano. A small piece of equipment just keeps going around and round and round, makes a big, big ditch in the middle, a big, big cauldron in the middle. And then we were able to take the materials that we sucked out of these barns and put it into these windrows, into these volcanoes. So the volcanoes worked really well. It shows, the pictures showed, putting it into the volcano and getting it to absorb. And what we let happen is, these are really thick walled, these are bigger than 24-inch walls. We put, just a really large, like 3-4 foot wall all around this whole material, and the base is also there. So nothing is running out. Once we get to that point, we have to deal with that, but we put 60,000 gallons into some of these big volcanoes, let it soak in, and then that material gets mixed up, and then it goes into into a windrow. It's built into a windrow, and that's what we consider, you call them burritos, we call them Twinkies. So we have the carbon on the bottom, we put that carbon base down, we put the Twinkie middle, 24 inches on, in from the edges, and then we put that material, that mixture in there. Then we put another layer of carbon in there, and if we can, it depends on how it stacks up. Some of these things just don't stack up that well, even if they are bulked with a lot of wood chips, it just slumps down, and we can't have that either. So we put we put plenty of carbon in those layers. Okay. This was, and God, we were dealing with a lot of eggs also, and eggs can be done. Somebody in the northeast corner of New York State called me, said they had 60,000 eggs that they needed to deal with because of a refrigeration issue. Their refrigerators went off. It was really hot. They couldn't safely sell those eggs or use those eggs. So I talked them through building the windrows, building the volcanoes, and the tubs, so that they could compost all of those eggs. And they successfully did it in August. I was away, so I was only on the phone, but it worked. Boy, oh boy. Sorry, this is a big pain. We got some carbon pictures. Okay. I'm glad I left this one in. I wasn't going to leave this one in, but it obviously came into the different composting methods. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about the carbon. Some, chunky wood chips, some shavings. We really don't want to have any sawdust. Doesn't work well. It doesn't allow air to flow through the pile. So that's a problem. I'm trying to think if there's another way that we can look at another video, another PowerPoint where they The pictures are actually there. I don't know if anybody can help with that.
Jean, I don't know what you're trying to show, but I can pull up a couple pictures from our pile.
And I have yours, so we can go
Okay.
with yours. I have yours down at the end, and we were going to do a recap of it, so we can do all that at the end. We'll just
Jean,
talk about carbon. Yeah.
if you want to email it to me, I'll convert it back to a PDF and then I could maybe dump it in.
Yeah, we don't have time for that. So, well,
Okay.
thanks, Greg. I know you're way better at this stuff than I.
Well, when we,
Some of this,
You're doing good. Just keep clicking on.
yeah, some of this is hemp waste, cannabis waste. So these are all decent bulking materials that can be used. I had to work on hemp recently to dispose of hemp waste. So I was just showing the different sizes and some of the liquids that we have to deal with in hemp and mixing other stuff in with that. But really, we want a good wood chip. We can use something like a tub grinding. If people know what a tub grinding is, it's a big washing machine thing with knives in it that goes around and round and round and makes long stringy wood. And that also works pretty well, but it's hard for us to get that carbon back out. So we have to reuse and reuse and reuse that carbon when we're doing that. We have all kinds of butcher waste and mortality disposal educational materials. And this is just a poster that has all of this. And it does have, it's on our website. It has live links. So we have educational materials for composting, but livestock and butcher waste, roadkill, horses, because they're a different type of livestock. They're somebody's pet, and we have to act accordingly when we're discussing them. We have poultry, and we have poultry. More of our poultry is in poultry with disease outbreaks. So, and that talks about all the PPE that you have to be wearing. If you look at the picture on the lower left corner, we've got somebody in full PPE there, and that's to protect the person. It's really important. I talked just a little bit about when we were in that big barn, a little bit about the workers' safety and worker health. We've got to make sure people are doing things safely and people are protected, especially the workers on the farms. We also have the poultry, we have posters for all of these things and videos for all of these. So there's a fact sheet, a poster, and a video. And we have translated some of our materials into Spanish, and we just translated the poultry response one into Spanish because we're in the HPAI situations, the high path avian influenza situations, where a lot of our workers don't speak English. They're scared to death that we come in full PPE and they have nothing. Maybe a mask, maybe not a mask. And we've got to be able to give educational materials to them so that they know what's going on, because it really is an unfair situation. So a lot of mortality, a lot of livestock information for dairies. We have a lot of Spanish-speaking workers on dairies. So a lot of those programs are translating a lot of their stuff into other languages so that other people will be able to get this information. We're on to Rebarock. So I'll go through. So Racy, I want to go from the beginning to the end, and I'll let you do this. But from where we started with you to where the grant went to where we are now. And these are the where we are now slides. So we can either Jen, we can either show the video and that will give some background of what Reber Rock is, and then we can go into this.
We're just
A little bit
coming.
about your goals first on this whole thing.
Yeah, we're just coming into 9 minutes left to our time together. So
Okay.
I would say if you can get through the slides in our wrap up in those 9 minutes, I have shared the link to the video with others. So I think that hearing from Racy will be the most effective thing. And when we send the recording out, we'll make sure that the video is linked to there. And we can also send your updated slides, the slide deck, Jean.
Yes. Yep. Well, we'll get it done again. I'll just redo it.
Okay,
So we have it.
gotcha.
Okay, Racy.
Great. We started 2 years
Here's
ago.
here's the
Yeah,
start.
that's an old picture. Yeah, that's great.
Yep.
We started with working with Jean two years ago. And we're really just trying to make an effective static pile with the viscera that we produce in our butcher shop from chickens, and have that static pile in the spring be compost, usable compost for gardeners, to just come and haul it away. We are a pasture-based meat farm, so we don't use the compost on farm, and don't need it. And so we're looking to move it or sell it. And we started with Jean, learning how to build a pile, and have had a couple years now of learning different aspects of how our carbon available, feedstocks work together. We bed our chick brooder with peat moss. And so we have a lot of peat moss mixed with manure to compost, but it's very dry and fine. And so trying to figure out the best sort of recipe for this static pile has been the goal over the couple of years. And we've tweaked a couple different things. For the example, the first year we would all the feathers would come from the plucker and go into sort of like a big ball into, so it'd be like a feather Twinkie. Yum. And that did not decompose. That did not go anywhere. It was like fossilized. The feathers were just a big ball of semi-gooey, feathers in the spring. So that didn't work very well. So this last year we started spreading out the feathers more, and they disappeared. We didn't see them at all. I'll be interested to see this year. Last year we actually kept pretty much all of the bones of the chickens for stock. So leg bones, even from deboning, we kept for stock, and it didn't go into the pile. And that was really nice because it meant in the spring it was like completely ready to go. We have a cannabis grower down the road who takes the entire pile every year, and a lot of local gardeners who would like it if we could produce more. And this year we're composting a lot more of the leg bones. So chicken leg bones. So I'll be interested to see how that works this year. I don't know. What else do you want me to say, Jean? Steph? Yeah.
So here I'll click.
Yeah, we've definitely.
Talk about your pad.
So we got a soil and water grant this year to build a composting pad. That if Trisha's still on, I don't know if she is, but if she is, there was a big debate about whether it made sense to use gravel or do concrete. And we were really wanting gravel because it's still a permeable surface. This is not a covered compost yard. And we wanted the surface to continue to be semi-permeable. And so far that's been great. We have a brand new operator doing the compost pile, and there's been a learning curve, but it's also been fine so far this year. Our wood chips came from a local municipality, and when we were building the compost pile and they were hauling gravel for the pile, the mine was right, or the quarry was right next to the wood chip pile, so they just backhauled like a year or 2 years worth of chips for us during the construction process. So that was very convenient, but we will have to figure out where to get wood chips in the future, like we have in the past. The wood shavings we get from a neighbor, and we get those in like little amounts, which is pretty inefficient but free. And then yeah, we've been really rigorous in taking pictures of the keeping track of the temperatures this year. And so it's been really interesting to see as the batch size changes or as where the location in the windrow. And I'm curious to try this pre-mixing before, like mix some carbon in before we put it in the pile. And interested to know more, Jean and Craig, about what the ratio would be for that pre-mixing. But yeah, we definitely have predation issues. And I don't know, Jean, if you have a picture in there of our whole effort to keep the predators out. But we've used a canvas tarp, 2 painting tarps, just the canvas kind you get at Lowe's, this year to pretty good effect. And definitely the more carbon we put on, the better. The pile is sort of peaked enough that it's hard to get enough on the top. So I think we probably could do some work on widening the base. But then I found that widening the base actually makes that layer too thin. And so maybe this pre-mixing would help, or the stair stacking like you're talking about would help. And then we could have more carbon on the top, because with the pointed top, the carbon just falls off and that top is thin. So yeah. Many issues with the gravel. Trisha, we really would only see that in the spring. It's not an issue now. It's a tiny issue now when our operator's learning how to shovel from the wood chip pile and put it onto start the windrow, but it's a pretty minimal. He can manage for that. The bigger issue is when we're picking up the pile in the spring. And one of the things that Jean had suggested is really just like give yourself a margin, right? Don't scoop at the gravel, right? Take 6 inches or 4 inches off the bottom, like scoop at 4 inches, put the bucket at 4 inches up. So you're not picking up the gravel. And since we're just making the pile back in the same place, like it doesn't need to be perfectly clean. And it's very little. It's not actually wasting it. It's going to be built back into the next pile. And we did that. We had just a dirt pad last year that did have some gravel and stones, and we wanted to avoid those. And we tried that this year. And it worked pretty well. And then we actually had a small rake that we were able to rake the rest up with. And then we just were able to use it on our garden and didn't have a problem. We may have to sift it anyway if these leg bones don't disappear in 6 months. So if we were sifting it, then the gravel pieces would probably come out. It's also a reason why we're not yet making a line of fancy compost for home gardeners. So that, we're not bagging it. We're just selling it by the dump trailer load to folks who don't mind doing a little of the work themselves. So our market right now is that more down market.
Mm-hmm. But you're making a decent dollar on the product.
Yeah, I guess I don't really have a great point of comparison, but we sell, so it's like 10,000 chickens worth of compost, and we probably make about $1,000 on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
so the cloth and gravel pad is interesting. There's an NRCS specification for the cloth and gravel pads.
Yeah.
We have a resource that talks just about all the different types of pads that you want, but this is not a permanent surface. It's a less permanent surface than trying to jackhammer, cement or asphalt back up when you don't want it on a wonderful farm, a wonderful organic farm. So we used it, NRCS developed the spec, and we've pushed it more and more because it does do a good job protecting the groundwater. It does filter things out and works really well. You have a surface that you can function on 365 days of the year without sinking in. And it also is just, it's not a permanent surface. You will pick up gravel for a little while or bank run for a little while, but after a year, you're not going to have that much of that. That's going to be a thing of the past also.
Yeah. And our temperatures are getting, I know we need to hop off, but I just wanted to say too that we're really happy with where the temperatures have gotten this year, and tracking it has been really useful and helpful. And so far we've been able to move it off the farm in the spring. So we stop processing in about 3 weeks, and it sits until March. Actually, it can sit as late as until May. We need it off there for the new pile to start. So it sits until May, and then it's been ready for the last 2 years to varying degrees of doneness, but pretty done.
Okay. Should we just run that the video out? This is a short.
No, I think people can watch that on their own.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do want to, and I did send an email quickly or a message that if folks have to hop off because we did say 3:30, feel free. But because this is recorded and there are still some people on, if I hate to cut the conversation short because this is a great opportunity for many people with a lot of experience. And Craig did respond, Racy, if you saw that, but
Yeah,
I
I
did
see
want
that.
to announce, and when I send the recording out, I'll also notify this that the original intention of this format was that we were going to be doing this part in person, and then we were going to transition over to Racy's farm. There's a whole bunch of reasons why we went remote, but the timing was one of them. So we are going to open up Racy's farm for like an open house type situation sometime in the next month or so. There's nothing replaces being able to see, feel, touch, smell the whole process. So folks who are listening to the recording and folks on the call still, that is something coming down the pike to accompany this. So we hope that you will join us for that opportunity as well.
Yeah, and I would say we're very open. Like the day that we make the pile is Mondays. And we only have 3 more left in terms of chicken processing to make that pile. So if anyone's in the area and wants to stop by on a Monday afternoon, just let me know. And I'd be happy to put you in touch with my staff if I'm not here.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that unless there are other questions, I think we are all set. If we want to play the video, and people can jump off if they need to.
I've got a quick question for Craig and Jean on this pre-mixing question. I think it's fascinating to think about how we would do that. And I have a ton of logistical questions because the carbon stock is in a separate place from the nitrogen stock. And so mixing them would be really, I can't quite figure that out. But in any case, one of the questions I have is, it would be great if we could possibly do it if we could mix like the peat moss with the butcher waste, but the peat moss is more dense and it's the finer material. What do you think about that versus the wood chips?
Something that has peat moss has no structure.
Yeah. Okay. So you need more structure.
I think it just silage would be better.
Well, wood chips is my other option, I think, because
Wood
we've got
chips would be
peat shave,
fine.
we've got the peat, we've got shavings, and we have wood chips, and that's what we're dealing with this year
Some
for an
shavings.
option.
Shavings would be every little bit helps. So Craig was showing me some pictures of some ground beef that looks like pretty much ground beef with lots of fat in it, and it's going to take so much bulking to be able to actually make it work. We can do it, but it's that the farm that I was talking about, the very large farm with all the ducks and the feathers and all that kind of stuff, it's a big job and it takes a lot of carbon. So you need, anybody who's got butcher waste needs a lot of carbon. Craig, go for it.
Yeah, I was only referencing back to Racy's comments about her concern on her top layer not making temps. If she would mix a little bit of carbon with that carcass and then put that in the core, she may just have it broken up a little more and it may make temp quicker. Racy, your concern, I don't think was really a concern of Jean or myself from when I saw the picture of your two layers. They looked fine. Jean's comments about how to build those layers at the same time probably will take care of that, and it's just another option.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
So
it's probably, I mean, I was sort of, I think the 1-to-1 ratio of pre-mixing is a little bit challenging. I have to think about it a little bit, but at least some degree of wood chip combination in the bucket before it goes into the pile is
yep,
totally
that's fine
possible.
too.
I
Yep, no,
also
that's
can't,
fine too.
I don't want our compost pile is actually pretty far from our butcher shop, and so I don't want my guys making 2 trips back and forth. Like right now, they're able to make 1 trip down and then finish the pile. I don't want them to dump half the bucket, then some chips, then come back, get more viscera. So there's the logistical efficiencies to think about. But I think we could mix. We could have shavings or wood chips on hand at the butcher shop that go straight into the buckets where the blood and the feathers and the viscera are going before they get dumped into the high volume
And then
tractor
as you
bucket.
dump that out, that
Yeah,
became
just goes
your
mixed.
start of your layer and your mix, and then you could dump some more on.
Yeah, I'll try that. We'll try that.
Yeah.
I was just texting our guy while this was happening to see if he'd already done it today, if he'd already piled everything in today, and he had, but we'll try next week.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
That's all.
Good.
That's helpful.
And Racy, do you do food waste too?
Yeah, we put a little bit of food waste in, mostly just from my house, and we have our workers live here on the farm, and so they do some of theirs as well. But it's very minimal. So it's like 50 pounds to, it's probably 1%. It's like, or what's that? 10%, 50 pounds to 500 pounds of viscera. So it's not very much. And this is the first year we've actually put it in. So I don't know how that's going to work. We have never put it in the past because I wanted to keep everything completely organic, but our buyer
It
now
still will
doesn't
be.
care that much. So we were
It
going to
still
try it.
will be organic. It still will be. That's okay. Even if you
Right.
pick food waste. We are encouraging farmers to take in food waste, especially your setup is kind of neat. You're very rural, so there might not be a lot of takers, but people are coming in to buy your products. And if they wanted to drop off their food waste, and they're usually going to be good sorters because they'll do what you say, then you can mix that into your piles and you can have some other piles and it will just give you more compost.
Yeah. Yeah. I aspire to having the time to manage small details like that.
Yeah.
I think it would be possible.
I know.
And I think people would do it. And people have asked us, especially people who aren't members of a CSA, which we're not a CSA. And so people come to us and say, hey, do you take compost too? Or can I bring you my glass? Like, how can I recycle with you? And it's a piece of the puzzle we aren't quite able to handle at this point. I can't even get mine down to the pile, let alone somebody else's. So but I have thought about that. Essex Farm does a lot of that. I've also witnessed, we like the front of our farm to be very clean and neat and tidy. And that's also something to manage if people are dropping off food waste. And I'm sure, we talked to Blue Line Compost also about trying to, like, could they bring us? Do they want to bring us anything that's in the area so they don't haul? If they're expanding to this area, would they want to bring it to us? Instead of hauling it all the way back to them? Would they want us to be a drop-off point? Like we've had some conversations that didn't really go anywhere with this other local company, but that's certainly something I'm open to, but it would have to be pretty high volume and streamlined. So
that's good. And I think Racy, you can the way that a lot of the haulers work is they take it to different places at different times. So you can just say, okay, this day I can take
yeah.
and work it out that way. But it's something that you have to work into, and we're trying to work you through this part and get you going on all of this. So I think you're doing a great job.
Yeah. Thanks.
You know, this is future planning.
Yeah. Yeah. And we will keep doing more chickens. So we will keep having more compost. So I'm not too concerned. I think our problems in terms of volume will get less because we will have more viscera to deal with over the next couple years. So yeah, just continuing to learn is helpful at this point.
And so,
So
Jean,
that,
is there anything I have actually gotten the integration of food scraps into animal mortality composting question a fair amount in the past. Is there anything that would need to be noted or changed or done differently?
no, just more carbon, because it's going to be a nitrogen source again.
Gotcha.
So, but if you have a small animal, if you have low amounts of material, it actually could help the process.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Guys, I have to hop off. Actually, I got to go pay my taxes before the post office closes. So
Fun times. Well,
sorry.
I think we're good.
Well,
Thank
thanks
you.
everybody for bearing with us on this this video. I will get it redone before we post it.
Thank
I'll
you,
get all
Jean.
the slides in there, and then you'll be able to see it all. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.